Hello there and welcome back to another video. Today we'll be discovering what happened to fan favourite Dexter Jettster in the years following his meeting with Obi-Wan in Dex's diner. Without further delay, let's get into the video. In the years prior to him living on Coruscant, Dex worked closely alongside Maz Kanata and her pirate crew, where he would often visit her castle on Takodana. Dex initially met Obi-Wan when he happened to be working a job on the same planet where Kenobi was protecting younglings. After Dex's crew leader attempted to use the younglings for their own gain without any care for their safety, Dex helped the younglings relocate somewhere safer and travelled back to Coruscant with Obi-Wan. It is there where he set up the famous Dex's Diner. He formed a close bond with Kenobi where he would help him on various missions. There was one instance in particular between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones where Obi-Wan helped Dex out with a thief who was stealing customers' items from the diner. During Attack of the Clones is where we first got to meet the big figure known as Dexter Jettster, when he helped his old buddy determine the origins of this mysterious poison dart. This of course got Obi-Wan on the path to Kamino, where he discovered this mysterious clone army that had been commissioned for the Republic, and thus began the Clone Wars. The Return of the Jedi from a Certain Point of View book features a chapter on Dex that tells us what he had been up to since we last saw him. A pirate holonet channel. The last glimmer of freedom in the Imperial Center was playing the destruction of the second Death Star on a loop. The Empire had been defeated and the Galactic Civil War was over. Dex blamed himself. It was a war he had unintentionally helped start. The citizens of Coruscant were celebrating, but Dex had seen this before. When the Republic became the Empire and other similar instances on other worlds, his species, the Basilisk, lived long lives. He had become weathered by his experiences and the guilt he felt for starting the war. Hope was for the foolish, and tonight the fools were feasting. Tomorrow they would still wake up with empty stomachs. His mind went back to that day Obi-Wan entered his diner with a small object. He still remembered the shape of the Kamino saber dart, the sharpness of its Durasteel embedding prongs, the dried blood that covered its injector needle. He was so eager to impress his young friend. He never imagined what it could have led to, with the fall of the Republic, the light of the Jedi being extinguished, and that billions would die. Dex felt the weight of every life lost as a result of him, but none more so than the boy he had met on Lenara, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Dex never knew what became of him. Had he been killed on the front lines, or had he been killed in the Purge? He hoped it was the former. The thought of his own men turning and killing him was too much to bear. The image of the Jedi Temple alight that night was imprinted on his brain. Smoke was still pouring out days after the flames had died. He remembered how the air tasted of ash and soot covered his diner for weeks, no matter how much it was cleaned. His droid, Wanda, would attempt to keep his spirits up by telling him that it will be fine. She broke down 3 years later, and Dex lost the diner soon after that. Now, 2 decades later, Dex could smell the faint scent of smoke through the vents in his tiny level 2401 apartment. Dex knew this wasn't just ordinary smoke, and he also knew the smell of fire caused by laser blasts. He then heard the faint echo of blaster rifles beyond the cries of celebration. Knowing he would be better to stay put, yet never one to listen, he gathered his old mining jacket and his blaster. He hated the blaster, sharing Obi-Wan's thoughts on their lack of civility. That's probably why the Empire loved them so much. Dex wondered what Obi-Wan would think of today's events, and everything that had come before it. He was practically a pup the last time Dex saw him, and even then, his eyes had seen too much. Dex hated the thought. He had punished himself enough the last 25 years. As he left his apartment, he could already see beings in celebration exchanging words in all sorts of languages. This brought a smile to Dex's face. Coruscant was the place beings from all walks of life came to live a better life. The Empire never understood this with their emphasis on humans. The galaxy was better because of its diversity, not despite it. A young boy excitedly told Dex that the Emperor was on board the Death Star when it blew up. Dex refused to believe it unless he saw a body. The Emperor made himself scarce apart from holonet appearances. The young boy was confused why he would be on the station if he knew the rebels were coming. Dex remembered the senator from Naboo playing the long game. If he was on the Death Star, not fully believing he actually was, it's because someone finally outmaneuvered him. A bunch of civilians were on their way to the Imperial Palace to see what they could grab and maybe even knock around a stormtrooper or two. Dex advised the kid to stay away from the situation. He made his way to the upper levels of Coruscant where he entered what remained of his diner's kitchen. The equipment had been ripped from the graffiti-covered walls and windows had been broken. The sight broke his heart and he gave himself a moment to mourn this dream he had lost. He stepped outside to the sight of the Imperial Palace alight, and beings in the street celebrating. Some had made noisemakers out of all sorts of things, with one in particular being a stormtrooper helmet. Dex stared at it, reminded of the first time he saw the clone troopers on Geonosis through the holofeeds. As he made his way with the crowd, their positive energy was contagious. Maybe it really was finally over. Maybe the Emperor was dead and the Republic would be rebuilt. Maybe his mistake had finally been corrected. As Dex continued on his way, making sure to stay away from any potential riot troopers, he heard a high-pitched scream. Turning to the sound, he saw a group of people carrying a stormtrooper over their heads towards a deadly drop off of a platform. Although he hated the Empire and had barely any compassion for those who fought for it, he knew what was right. Running towards the group, he screamed for them to put him down. Meanwhile, the stormtrooper was begging as the rioters ignored him, with some of them even smiling. As they prepared to throw the trooper to his death, a young girl stepped in front of them with her arms out to her side, saying, "No." Her sudden appearance caused the rioters to drop the trooper to the ground. They angrily barked at her to get out of the way as the group cited all their grievances with the Empire. The girl stood her ground, telling them, "The Empire killed billions in the name of peace and security. That's how they ended. It's not how we're going to start." One of the rioters drew a weapon to attack the trooper with, hoping that would scare the young girl, but instead she stood her ground. As Dex went to intercept, the trooper took off his helmet, revealing the face of a terrified young boy, no older than 20. The rioters were shocked. The Empire had dehumanized its soldiers to the point that it was a genuine shock to see a child behind the white helmet. The young girl attempted to help the young boy, but he ran off in search of safety. All of a sudden, there was the sound of blaster fire. Looking near the recently fallen Palpatine statue, Dex saw the Coruscant security forces had come out with blasters, just as he feared. The crowd around him had also heard this commotion, which turned them into a wild stampede. Sensing the danger in this, Dex shouted out a booming command for everybody to follow him. As he helped people to safety, he felt a shot hit his shoulder. Basilisk hide is tougher than many other beings, so it was barely anything to him. Dex was the last one off the platform, taking one last look behind him at the bodies of the people who were not fortunate enough. He slowly made his way back to his diner, gasping for air by the time he arrived. Trying to catch his breath, he heard soft, muffled cries. Attempting to reduce the threat of himself, he reassures whoever is there that he isn't an Imperial. The mysterious person stood up, revealing herself to be the young girl from the platform. She introduced herself as Vekan Menez. Asking her why she saved the trooper, Vekan explained that used to be the Jedi Temple. The Emperor tried to reshape everything into his image, but he couldn't reshape that. He made the temple his palace, tried to shroud it in his darkness, but he couldn't stop it from being what it always was, a beacon of light. Dex observed she looked too young to remember the Jedi, but she explained that she had heard legends. Dex laughed. He attempted to humanize them, saying the Jedi were just as flawed as him or her. He knew many Jedi, but only one of them he considered a friend. Vekan went to ask Dex what became of his friend, but he shook his head. There were many things he wished to tell her, like how much he blamed himself, how he wished he had lied that day in the diner with the Camino saber dart, that no matter how much he tried to help after the purge, it was never enough to wash away all the guilt he woke up with and carried all day until he cried himself to sleep. But instead, he just asked for a better answer for his question. "Because the Jedi were like stars," she explained. "I've never seen a star, but I've been told they're out there. No matter how dark my night gets, they're still there, burning, making someone's way lighter." Getting emotional, she continued, "That's why I did it, because it's what a Jedi would do." This lit something within Dex, but he wished to control it for now. Outside, Grand Vizier Masamida's voice could be heard over the speakers, reminding citizens of their restriction and that the Empire still reigned. Vekan asked Dex if he thought the Jedi would ever come back. He had heard rumors of a Jedi blowing up the first Death Star, but he didn't necessarily trust the information. He honestly had no idea if the Jedi would return, which wasn't the answer Vekan wanted to hear, but the only one he could offer. As they parted ways so she could get home before the curfew, Dex stopped to look at her. She had risked her life to protect an enemy because she believed light could shine through the darkness. It reminded him of something the boy he had met on Lenara would have done. It was probably this mindset that caused the warrior to meet his end. Dex remarked, "There's truth in legends," which instantly caught Vekan's interest again. He pointed towards the smuggler's route he was about to take out of the diner, telling her it can take her across the entire city and to places the Imperials wouldn't even know about. Dex offered to show her around it, to which Vecin accepted, acknowledging how helpful it could be. "It's a lot of walking," he warned her. "But while we do, I'll tell you about my friend, Obi-Wan." There we have it, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. Who would have thought a lore video about Dex would go for so long? Some of the stories in these from a certain point of view books are really beautiful, and this is another one. It was amazing to see how Dex blamed himself for the Clone Wars and everything beyond, after he only tried to help his friend. Although he had all these negative feelings towards himself, and no closure on what happened to Obi-Wan, he was still a good person, rushing to the aid of the stormtrooper being marched to his death. I think my personal favourite part was hearing how Vecin, a young girl who wouldn't have been born when the Jedi were active, perceived them to be, and how they still even influenced her actions. That was really beautiful. With war having just reached an end, perhaps Dexter can begin to heal, and I'm sure sharing stories of his friend Obi-Wan with Vecin will be a good start. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.